let's have a quick chat. This is probably the softest yarn I've ever worked with. She's a glidey one. My gauge here is whack. I'm ripping those sleeves out, fresh out of the freezer. This looks horrible.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. I actually haven't filmed a video at all in a couple of weeks. Since last Saturday, you may have caught my 2025 knitting plans. We're going to get into a little bit of that today, but I do feel a little bit out of practice and I'm trying to remember what it is that we were talking about the last time, and now it's all rushing back to me. So I think before we get started, let's go ahead and announce the 3 winners of the hashtag Fix Finish Freshen Up February challenge. I will be gifting a pattern of your choice to the 3 people that are on the screen here. These were randomly selected from the comments that you left in the last podcast episode. So congratulations to those of you who are on the screen. And if you don't mind just sending me an email, my email is listed down below. If you could just include in that email the pattern that you would like to be gifted, as well as your Ravelry username, and I will get those patterns out to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much to everyone who participated in the very casual knit along. I think that the concept of Fix Finish Freshen Up February was a really inspiring sort of just challenge, a way for us all to push ourselves. However, I'm also going to talk today about a couple of the ways in which I think that concept may have been a little bit problematic. At least it was for me. And so yeah, we'll get into that as we get into the projects that maybe spark that conversation. And of course, before I get into it all, quickly what I'm wearing, this is actually a self-drafted crocheted sweater, and I wanted to wear it today because it kind of pertains to one of the projects we'll be discussing, but also, I thought it was maybe a good time to pop this on since I did crochet this using the KNC, that's the Joann's House brand cotton yarn. It's their essential cotton. I love this yarn. It's about a worsted weight, and I crocheted this sweater a few years ago now, and I absolutely love it. This is my favorite time of year to wear it. I kind of bust this out as soon as the weather just starts to warm up that little bit, which it has here in Connecticut. So it's a super, super, super soft cotton. And although it's a heavier yarn, I still think it's perfect for the summer, especially if you're going to knit or crochet it into something like this that has that lace sort of texture, a little bit more of a breeziness about it. I just think that you cannot go wrong. So if your local Joann's is having their big going out of business sales, I know.
You just can't get into it.
Maybe at least you could snag some while they still have it. So I thought I would wear this if you're looking for a good cotton yarn. Okay, with all that out of the way, why don't we go ahead and dive on in? I am going to completely toss any normal flow out the window today because I'm just not in the mood to talk about my patterns or my projects in that order. And so instead, I'm going to grab them in what feels like a more natural order to me. So today I'm going to be showing you 2 projects that you've never seen before. And the first one is a test knit that I am doing for a fellow podcaster here on YouTube. Her name is Joyanne and she goes by Tokes Knits on her YouTube channel. I've been a follower of her for quite a long time now. I think probably since her first episode. And she asked if I would be interested in participating in this test knit for her. So I'm so excited to be test knitting her first sweater design, the Simi Sweater. This also kind of bleeds into an acquisition that was just part of this test knit. So this was a test where the yarn was sponsored, and I've always wanted to participate in a test knit where you do get the yarn as your compensation sort of for testing the pattern. And in this case, it's a brand new to me yarn. The brand, it's called, I'm assuming that's Onling. It has the little dots over the eye. So I'm going to call this Onling. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's their Onling #1 super soft wool and Angora. And mine is in the shade mustard. Now, if you did catch that 2025 knitting plans video, you know that I've been wanting a yellow sweater, and I thought this might be it. Now, I will say that this just does this does just lean a little bit into that green. It's a very true, like electric honey mustard color. So it definitely does have that more green and sort of Frank Ochre-esque undertone to it. A color that I absolutely love. I just don't know that it totally fits the bill of my yellow sweater, my sunshiny yellow sweater that I really want to make this year. But regardless, I thought it was a perfect choice for this very simple, classic V-neck sweater. This is going to be such a closet staple. I thought it would be really fun to play with the color just to spice things up a little bit. And let me show you where I'm at, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the yarn. This is actually probably in the absolute worst state possible to show you, but this is what I have. Obviously, I've gotten a lot done. I gotta tell you, it's been a little bit since we just knit something stockinette, and I just kind of fell in love. I have been working on this now for about 6 days, and it's a drop shoulder design. So you start with the back, cast on the fronts. Of course, we have a V-neck, so you are kind of working down that V-neck as you go, and then everything is connected under the arms once the top half reaches that point, your typical kind of drop shoulder thing. And actually, while we're sitting here today, something that I can do is rip out my needles on this neckband, and that will help you to see it a little bit better. I actually was just chatting with Joyanne and letting her know that I was having a little bit of trouble with it's a 2x2 rib neckband, and for whatever reason, mine was just not working out. And so I think we came to the conclusion that I picked up the wrong amount of stitches, so it's completely my fault. But I'm just going to have to go back and start that over. So actually, if I just rip this out right now, then you're going to be able to see everything a lot better, and that will make all of our lives a little bit easier today. So believe it or not, this isn't going to be the last time you're going to see me rip needles out of a project today, because apparently February was upset that I left frogging out of the hashtag. So March is coming back to bite me with the whole frog thing. And just like that, I will rip this out. So while I'm ripping this out, let me tell you about the yarn. This yarn, like I said, it's a wool and Angora blend. Will it tell me the percentages right on here? 75% super fine wool. It says super 100s. I'll have to figure out what that means. And then 25% selected Angora. It's 180 meters to 50 grams. This yarn was gifted, like I said, for the test knit, and I'm blown away. I actually think that this yarn, I believe that the original price of this yarn is $16 for a ball. So a pricier yarn by all means. But what I have to say is that if you are someone who likes the look of wool and mohair, wool plus silk mohair, can you see all the fibers going up in the air? Oh gosh. If you like the look of wool plus mohair, but you don't like the prickliness of a silk mohair, or you don't like the price tag that's associated with that, because typically, even if I'm thinking off the top of my head, I believe a knitting for olive silk mohair, let's say conservatively, is about $11 a ball. And then get down here. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Come on. So Knitting for Olive on their website, I decided to just look this up. Their soft silk mohair is about $9 a ball. And then their merino is $7.60 a ball. If you're someone who does not like the feeling of the silk mohair, I think that this yarn would be a perfect swap for that kind of combination, if not better, because you still get the halo. I lost my project. What did I do with it though? you still get the halo with this yarn. I mean, even quite a fuzzy halo at that. But this, now, of course, I'm still working on this, but between the gauge swatch and what I've been working on, that's where I'm making these inferences from. This is probably the softest yarn I've ever worked with. I can only imagine that next to skin, this is going to feel incredible. I actually love the feeling of working on this. You're not dealing with 2 strands of yarn. This is just, I think, an absolutely perfect, if not better, swap for a merino and silk mohair combo. And because it is only 1 strand of yarn, if this yarn were to go on sale, which it looks like Onling runs some sales periodically, they had one up most recently for a couple of their different merino wools. If this were to go on sale, then it's even going to drop you below further the combo. So it would wind up being a more affordable project than it would be if you were to do that knitting for olive mohair merino combo. If you're able to find this yarn on sale and you're working with Angora. I've never done that before, but those bunnies must be really something special because this is, I'm telling you, so soft. If you're sensitive, I just think that this is like, I don't know, it's almost felty like. When you're working with the yarn itself, the strands almost feel kind of felted. So then it's so interesting when you see that halo pop up and it's just really fuzzy and warm and fleecy. It's just divine, absolutely divine. They didn't gift me this for this channel. I was gifted this for the test knit. There is zero affiliation here. I'm just letting you know that I could see myself purchasing this yarn with my own money again because it's just stunning, not to mention the fact that it's working up so evenly. So let me put this onto Lena the Hanger now. There it is. So obviously, since this is a test knit, I really don't have too much to say about it yet, other than the fact that I can already tell that her writing style is clear and beautiful. I think it's going to be a great pattern for newer knitters or just anyone looking for a nice basic sweater. It's supposed to have 2x2 ribbing details, and I just think that the star of this show is the yarn. I really hope that you can see here just how beautifully it is knitting up. And this is using 4mm needles. Like I said, this guy's been on the needles for less than a week now. And it's just been the knitting experience that has kept me wanting to work on it. So I'm thrilled to be test knitting this, but also that I can't say enough good things about the yarn other than the fact that the little fibers are flying around now because I just ripped all of that out. But seriously stunning. I'm excited about this color. And it looks like she actually just emailed with an update for some of the collar instructions. So I should be able to get that done in the next couple of days. And then I really was kind of focusing on getting this to the body so that this is also now my mindless knitting, which is really great because the next project I'm going to show you is not so mindless. So it really did require that. But yeah, just take a look. There were short rows worked in the back. I'll tell you more when this is all done and set to release so that you have all the info that you need if you're interested in knitting this. But as of right now, I'm thrilled, really, truly thrilled. Love the yarn. I will be keeping an eye out. And I just thought I'd mention that about the quality. I mean, it's just really beautiful stuff. I've also been spit splicing that and it seems to be working. I never really know if that's something that you can only do with wool or natural fibers in general. So I always kind of give it a shot if I think that it's an option because one less end to weave in is always a good thing. And it seems to have been working really, really wonderfully here. And so that is the Simi Sweater. The deadline, I think, for this test knit is April 15th. So it'll be getting done sooner than later. Before I put it away, why don't I pop a progress keeper on there? I had just stopped the last time I finished a ball of yarn, and that was when I started the collar. So of course I'm like dead in the center of the front of the sweater. But Simi Sweater, let me put those stitch stoppers back on too, because that's the one thing on the metal needles. This yarn is just slip sliding. She's a glidey one. But okay, Simi Sweater done. Okay, next up is a project that I've been talking about, and I'm so excited. I did officially cast on my Stitches sweater by Veronica Lindbergh. This is a colorwork yoke, circular yoke sweater that I am making some exciting modifications to in order to use some yarn and stash and to play around with some new and fun techniques. So let me pop her onto Helena the Hanger and we can discuss everything. Okay. If you don't know what's going on with this situation, you're probably like, Nora, that's way too big. And yes, it is, because I am going to be felting mine in the end. My plan is to make this into a quarter zip style felted fleecy looking sweater. But instead of a zipper, I think I'm going to use snaps. And I have a lot to say here. So let's start with when I cast this on, which was 13 days ago. And I'll tell you that I was rocking and rolling, having the time of my life, knitting this up. This is only my second ever colorwork project. And boy, did I pick a doozy for number 2. But I was just really, really excited to see this all play out. Now, because I am planning to felt this, I had knit up a gauge swatch and then I felted a second gauge swatch, and I've been using the gauge from the felted gauge swatch because when you felt your fabric, it shrinks pretty significantly. So in order to achieve the bust circumference size that I am interested in having, I am knitting this up in the size 4XL, which is bigger than the size I would typically knit. If I was knitting this on gauge and just to have the sweater, I would probably go for the 2XL. So it's a little bit bigger in size, but also my gauge here is whack. Like, insanely off. The original pattern calls for 5mm needles, while I am using 6.5mm needles. And the yarn that I am using is a combination of thrifted yarns as well as yarns that my Aunt Virginia had gifted me. And so the plan originally was to have this sort of like 80s Barbie looking fleecy felty sweater. And then when I realized the size that I would have to knit and the way that the gauge was playing out and everything, I realized that I was going to have to ignore the sort of color instructions that they state in the pattern, where you're only working with 3 contrast colors and they're sort of repeating. And that was going to have to go out the window because I was not only going to have to remove the main color from in between the color work sections, and replace that with additional contrast colors. I also was probably going to be using a lot of these contrast colors in even just one zigzag stripe or something. So I really had to go rogue here and play around, and I did my best to map this out by coloring things in on my iPad as well as just lining the yarns up and seeing them next to each other. And my original plan was to just use what I have and ignore everything else so that I could use up what I had in stash and enjoy the process of putting up some walls to get creative inside, because I do feel like that's when I work best, is when I have some parameters. So I was really, really happy with the way that things were going. I started out with my gray color, which is going to be the main color of my sweater. And then I moved into this gorgeous yellow orange, stunning sunny color. From there, I replaced the main color background with just this mint green. So it's actually just a little bit of a shift from the main color of the sweater. And I liked that anywhere I was replacing the main color with a new one, I was trying to keep those levels of saturation more similar so that the contrast colors versus the main color sections could still have as much sort of pop as possible. And then I actually used this variegated yarn. This is what it looks like in the ball. So I'm actually using this held double. There's peach and lavender and yellow and minty blue colors in there. It's really beautiful. So I wanted that to kind of have its own moment, which is why I really thought it would be best in the little circle parts. Now, I will say that holding this yarn double, I have some sections where the colors kind of muddy each other up. So, it would be better if I was able to figure out kind of if there was a constant repeat across the two so that the peach was always with the peach and the yellow was always with the yellow and so on and so forth. But of course, that would take a lot more control than I was kind of willing to put into it. So I definitely think that those little circles could pop more than they do, but I still was really into it. And I was kind of then leaning into the more watercolory and a little bit less 80s pop sort of colors and a little bit more of a muted palette, which brought me a little more like a 90s, early 2000s vibe. So I thought I would play into that by putting the sort of bubblegum pink up against the army green. And then I knew that after knitting my felted swatch, which I'll just have to insert a photo of here, I knew that I loved that combination of the white background and then the brown yarn spelling out stitches. So I really thought I had enough to just go for it, but I found out quickly that I did not. I did not, in fact, have enough of the white yarn. And for the 4XL size and the pattern, well, for all of the sizes, the kind of dead space above the stitches, it's different. I think that that's just kind of where she was able to account for some space in the yoke depth. But I really wasn't thrilled with how much of the white there was right on top of the letters. And then it kind of wasn't going to be made up for underneath. So for me, because I was running out of that white yarn, and I was feeling like there was a lack of balance, I wound up knitting about halfway through the stitches and then ripping all the way back so that I could kind of reconfigure things. I was very happy that I had done that. For me, this actually sits really nicely and I'm happy with the placement of the letters and everything according to everything else. But I still did wind up running out of the white yarn. At that point, everything kind of just went downhill. I thought maybe I could just salvage the situation by just kind of switching colors, and I didn't want any straight lines. So I even did kind of white, yellow across the row where I was just running out of white yarn. And I wasn't hating it, but I wasn't thrilled. At that point, I realized that yellow was kind of a crucial color for me that I had set aside for the zigzag stripes that are below the graphic letters. And so then I started grabbing colors that were not part of the plan, like this purple, which compared to everything else is just such a cool tone. It just feels so random. So then I kind of tried to bring it back in with that variegated yarn again, the same one that I used in the circles. And okay. And then I brought the teal in, and that I wasn't loving. And then it was time to get back to the main color, at which point I kind of just said, this looks horrible. Something that was kind of funny to me is if you are a 90s baby, I don't know if you'll feel the same way or have this same memory, but seeing this, I was having this deja vu feeling like I've seen this before. And I wound up being able to find a picture. In the 90s, I swear we all had just like Disney printed sheets. And I know that we had these like Pocahontas sheets. And this literally looks like I was knitting some sort of homage to those bed sheets. And that I wasn't. So I paused and I talked to my boyfriend about it because I was really upset at this point. I mean, I was really rocking and rolling up until then. And the thing is that I really loved everything that was happening kind of from my hand up. I was sold. I was really in love with it. That this was ruining it for me. And with the colors, and not the colors, but the quantities of yarn that I had in different colors, I wasn't going to be able to make this something that I could really say that I was proud of and that I loved. So I went online and I was able to find what I think is kind of the modern version of this white yarn. This is some of the thrifted yarn that I had used. So it's a vintage yarn that is impossible to find. So this is the gray that's kind of the main color. And the white was the same brand, same yarn, just obviously in white. So I did order a couple of balls of what is that, like, modern version. I'm hoping that since it is just white, and because I'm planning to felt it, of course, it shouldn't be too noticeable that it's a different thing. And then I also picked up just a different kind of the same vibe of this single ply 100% wool yarn. I grabbed just a couple different colors to maybe use at the bottom here, because this wasn't working for me and I just didn't realize how much yarn I was going to use for all of these sections. So I'm hoping that when those arrive, I'll be able to pick this back up and get kind of where we need to go. So I won't rip the needles out right now because I've actually frogged this quite a few times already. And frogging with floats and trying to keep everything organized is super tricky. But this is the second thing that I'm talking about today that does need to be ripped back. And I'm going to rip back all the way to where you see the white start here and finish out the white section in white. And then I will decide what colors to use down here, but it will not be these. At least it won't be these in this order. And then after that, I think that I'm going to have to add a little bit more color work to the body of this sweater. I think that's kind of going to be a simple enough thing to do by maybe just even adding in an occasional zigzag row or something. I don't know. I think it's something that I could play around with and just have fun. That was the point of this project. But because of how much yarn this is just eating up, I think that I'm going to have to get creative to make sure that I have enough to finish the whole project the way that I want to. Now, the only other thing that I did here, and I was actually really proud of myself for figuring this out, when you go onto Ravelry and you look at the projects, this has also been something you guys have mentioned in the comments where the words that go across the sweater, it's stitche, and then that repeats so that you kind of read stitches, stitches. And some projects on Ravelry, you see that super clearly. It says stitches here. But then others say some weird other combination of those letters, if you know what I mean. And I didn't want that. So I deep dove into Ravelry and I literally started making a list of, okay, this one looks good. What size did she knit? Got it. Okay, this one looks bad. What size did she knit? Got it. Went through and figured that out. I went through and I figured that out size by size, and now I can't find where I wrote all of this down. But what I knew was that for the size 4XL, I was going to wind up with the weird looking stitches. And then I thought, how can I figure this out? So I counted the stitches that I had across my chest circumference. I checked how many stitches there are in the graphic chart. And from there, I actually wrote out here on my iPad, I can maybe show you. I drew a circle and I literally wrote stitches on the circle. I think I figured out that it repeats 8 times for my size. So by adding the S onto the end of the word where the chart is stitch again, I was able to then calculate if the chart was for the full word stitches, where would center be? And I think that wound up falling, being that it's an 8-letter word, stitches, and C is like that kind of big letter, it fell somewhere in the middle of this C. So I just went and changed my beginning of round to kind of that halfway point in the stitches graphic chart so that if that's where I'm starting on the center of the back, by the time I got to the center front, the thought is that my center line would line up with that C. Therefore, when you look at it from straight on, it should say stitches. No, I feel a little in the dark on any way to kind of test this theory until I split for armholes. And especially because it's on my largest cable that I have and still it's so bunched up on here. So in fact, I don't think I've even had it sitting straight this whole time. Oh no, I know I didn't. I literally had it all wrong. Hang on. Okay. The neck hole on this is already super wide from the original design, but then because of my gauge and everything, it's just like, this is actually obscene. But I believe that this here is the center front, which means that you should have that kind of bold stitches in the front. So my point being here that if you are interested in knitting this garment, I'm going to, but that's bothered you because so many of you said that it did. I'm going to try and find my note here where I figured out which sizes kind of have that issue. It's really a matter of which sizes had, I think, an odd number of the words. So if stitches was repeated like 7 times versus 8 times, it always started at the beginning of the word. So you would wind up with just the S on the front, and then it started the rest of the word. It was just a little bit funky. And it was such a simple thing to just say, okay, instead of beginning of round being the beginning of the letter S, just shift the whole chart so that I started with the letter C, I moved on to HES, and then went into TIT. There you go. So that was my remedy. I feel like I figured it out. And if I can, I will try to put into my Ravelry project page for this one exactly what I had done, maybe even which sizes are going to have to do that too, so that if that was what was holding you back from knitting this, maybe that'll help. I was really proud of myself. I figured that out, and it took me a while, and I literally had to draw it out into circles and everything, but I did manage to figure it out, and I'm really proud of it. So also, if I do wind up frogging this by the time I edit this video, I'll try to take a photo of it all laid out, because then when I take the needles out, it'll be a lot easier to see. But it looks like a full-on Christmas tree skirt. So that's the other thing. If you don't want a stitches sweater, but you kind of like this idea for, is this weird to say, for a Christmas tree skirt? I would say just knit this without the short rows, and you just end before you split for the sleeves. And I think it's super cute like that. So that's what's going on here. I'm waiting on the yarn to come in, and hopefully that will solve my little issues of the color. So sad. But otherwise, it's been on the needles for 13 days today. Man, I should not have frogged that collar. Those fibers have literally been intruding my face ever since. Okay, let's have a quick chat. So I wanted to talk about the Granada and a really just healthy update since the last podcast episode. First of all, the Granada, it's a beautiful, blousey, puffy, sleeved sweater by Claudia Quintanilla. The book that it's in, Memory Lane by Claudia Quintanilla, as well as the yarn, the Ito, Sensai, and Kinu, that was all gifted by Unit Toronto, which is Claudia Quintanilla. And I'm so grateful to be able to try out yarns that I would not typically purchase myself and just have the opportunity to try something a little bit new. So that's really amazing. And that's something that I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to get to do with this channel. Now, the sweater itself, I had a little bit of trouble reading the pattern in the book. I think that this is a very typical issue that people have when it comes to books. I'm sure that there's so many things that have to go in to just the editing process of a book and a magazine, those types of things where you need to like condense the pattern to make it fit within a certain amount of pages. So for me, I felt like the instructions of the sleeve were a little bit unclear. That being said, the sleeves are crocheted, and while I've crocheted full sweaters for myself before, I've never followed a crochet pattern. So I think between the writing style and the fact that I'd never read a crochet pattern before, and just those things combined, I wound up struggling with the sleeves on the sweater. Now, I really did think that it was fine, and I had only really figured out where things went wrong by the time I had finished one sleeve and then moved on to the other. And then I kind of realized where things went wrong, had tried to frog the single strand of mohair that makes up the sleeves, and it literally did not budge. Then I felt the weight of, oh my gosh, I was gifted this yarn for this project and it's not turning out right. I misread the pattern, but I also can't fix it because I can't rip it out. And like, what am I going to do? So I did what I do and I tried my best to salvage the situation. So where you guys saw me in the last podcast episode was trying that sweater on for the first time. Now, huge mistake that I made. You're like 8 feet away from me right now. And the screen that I can look into, it's all of this big. And I forgot to ever get up while I was wearing it to go look in a mirror. So all I could see, my only perspective was itty bitty little credit card size screen 8 feet away there and then looking down. At which point I was like, oh no, I think that this totally works. I think that this is fine. And we figured it out and no big deal. Then I sat down to edit the video and holy cow, first of all, that beginning of round situation, we don't even have to talk about it. It was horrible. But also, again, I was like, but I can't frog this yarn. It did not move when I tried to rip it out. And then you guys came to the rescue. I had so many comments saying, put the mohair in the freezer and that should help. So as we speak, the reason this project's not in my hands is because it's in the freezer and I'm going to take it out and we're going to try it together to see if that works because we have to fix this. Now I have a few ways of going about it. And so that is the good news. So for anyone who is concerned, I'm ripping those sleeves out. They're not staying on there. It's just a matter of exactly how I approach the rebuilding of the sleeves. In a perfect world, I pull this thing out of the freezer right now and the mohair just like unravels, happy as a clam, and I can recrochet the sleeves now that I've figured out what the pattern meant to say and the way I should have interpreted it. So crisis averted. Let's say it does not just unravel as easy as that. I realize that I have a good bit of yarn of that mohair still hanging out, which is, I'm sure, for the collar, which I was never planning to make. And for those of you who felt like that collar was such an integral part of the design, it's a really beautiful thing. It's simply not my style. And from the moment Claudia first posted about the sweater, she said that that was a completely optional, removable thing. And I think that even those of you who are like team collar, when you see the side-by-side of this photo that has the collar versus this video where Unit Toronto, Claudia Quintanilla herself, she features it without the collar. You can't tell me that that's just way more me. So, because I'm not planning to crochet the collar, I have that yarn left over, which I think would be just enough to recrochet the sleeves if I can't salvage the yarn. Also, if I can't salvage the sleeve yarn, I feel like I could whip it up into maybe some sort of cute scrunchie or something so that it doesn't just go to waste, because that's the number one thing I would hate to happen. The whole point here was to never waste the yarn of the sleeves when I couldn't make it work. And anyway, so that's kind of where things are at. There was also the point that I had touched on just earlier about the concept of fix, finish, freshen up February. And I'm sorry for those of you who aren't into the Just Chatting podcasts. I just really needed to talk about this today because I had a little bit of an epiphany with this situation. And that is, I think that there's a really big difference, at least for me, between finishing something and that inspiration of finish it in February. There's a big difference between that and just getting something done because you just want to get it done. And there's a time and a place for both of those things. So the perfect example is the sand cardigan. I really was so close to having that thing done, and it was really just the button bands that I just needed to get that done. And I finished it, and I love it, and I think that that thing is perfect. I'm obsessed with it. So I'm really glad that I went and I kind of just put the blinders on and just got that done. But in this situation, I lumped the Granada into this category of finish it when that never needed to be the case. I could have just taken my time. And I was just really excited about the idea of having everything done by the end of February. So for all of those reasons, I just want to take a break and say, I'm sorry if I pushed you in February to finish something where it was in a state of taking your time to finish it, or I know that there's a time and a place to be called to get something done like that, but then there's a time and a place to take your time to finish something. And I'm sorry if I put you in a situation where you felt unnecessarily pushed, because I did that to myself. So I'm a little bit bummed, but I'm also excited because everything that I'm about is the imperfections that make something so perfectly handmade, but also the times when it's not perfect and it's also not right. So we're going to remedy it. Let me go get this thing out of my freezer before my boyfriend finds it there and wonders, like, what are we doing with our lives? Fresh out of the freezer. The comments also said that you only have like 20 minutes to work with this in order to get the mohair to do anything. So I need scissors. I'm not prepared. Here we go. Here she is. I am going to grab this crochet sleeve, and because I could see exactly where I left off and I just don't want this to get warm, I am simply going to snip that. And let's see, is it gonna go? Now you see my gripe. Man, I really had such high hopes for this. This is where I was at. I'm telling you, I just took this out of the freezer. I literally just went and got it. So little bit deflated. I really thought that was gonna work. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna just, for giggles, let's try to even just rip out maybe from the wrong way. No. Okay. This is exactly what I didn't want to do too. I don't want to just hack up this yarn because it's precious. I mean, it's a gorgeous yarn. And I don't want to wind up with just all these little scraps, but I also don't want to wind up with sleeves that I can't wear. Man, I was like, this is going to be such riveting content. I'm going to sit here and this thing's going to unravel, and you guys knew exactly what was going on here, but I'm destroying this mohair. That's me ripping it. No. Okay, this is the predicament that I was in when I realized the mistake that I had made. And so that was why I just went and said, I have to honor this project and figure out a way to make it work. But in the end, while this is wearable, the sleeves are snug and I really like the puffy sleeves. And I was even trying to talk myself out of them. But we have a problem here. So I'm going to have to cut the sleeves off. And I just hope that the mohair that I still have that was intended for the collar that I was never planning to knit, hopefully, or crochet, geez, hopefully that's enough to get the sleeves done. Worst case at that point, that's actually why I never even wound up moving on to the I-cord finishes for the neckband. This is pretty much where you saw it last week, except for the fact that I finished knitting the body down to the length that it's supposed to be before finishing that off with also, I believe, an I-cord edge. I just decided I wouldn't do any finishes because worst case, I could always knit the I-cords as well as the long ribbed cuffs without the mohair. And obviously that would change things a little bit, but at least the sleeves, which are like the integral part of this, would be done. So that's a really big bummer, but I'm glad that I tried. And if you have any other recommendations, the freezer thing, I don't know what the theory is behind that, but some people did say that that's worked for them with their knit projects, but maybe it wouldn't work for crochet. And I think that there's just something about the crochet that is making this literally impossible. I mean, quite literally, I couldn't even rip out a single stitch without it doing that. So let me know if you have any creative ideas for the sleeves. This is actually why I wore this sweater today, because something that I thought was kind of funny is the fact that these sleeves and these sleeves are crocheted the exact same way, obviously just without the bobble rows. So here she is on Miss Helena, but I'll probably even just include some shots from the last podcast where I tried this on. I just think that this was a really cool and interesting demonstration of this like double crochet into a chain stitch situation. That's exactly what's happening on these sleeves as well as my own. And I just think that that's really fun to see the difference. That gauge, obviously, this yarn is way chunkier than a single strand of lace weight mohair. And the needle size, I think this would have been a 6mm needle. And then this is or hook. This is, I think, a 2.75mm hook. So that's just something I thought was kind of fun. Anyway, the next steps for this are going to be to cut off the sleeves and start them over again. Hopefully, now that I have crocheted them, twice, and that I've seen what I was confused about in the pattern, hopefully now when I knit them or crochet them again, they're going to turn out just right. Hopefully we have just enough yarn. And if not, we'll kind of figure it out as we get there. But I definitely wanted to update you on this situation because I know that you guys were just as bummed as I was, honestly. And I was trying to talk myself into it and it just wasn't working. So that's what I have to say about it. I feel like this wound up being a little bit more rambly than necessary, but I thought that that message was really important to get out. The other thing that I learned in this whole experience is that withholding cast-ons is not a good system for me. That stitches sweater was something that was really, really on my mind for weeks, and I'd done all the swatches trying to just kind of like keep myself from casting it on, when in reality, I should have, I think, just gone ahead and cast it on and then continue to work on this sweater at a leisurely pace so that it wasn't a matter of get it done so that you could start the new project. It'll be so shiny and fun. And instead it would just be, okay, I cast that on. Now I can pace myself with both projects, but instead I wound up in this weird situation where this backfired. I cast on the stitches sweater, ran out of that yarn. The new yarn for the test knit showed up, started that, messed up the collar. So we're just having a time over here. But I think that the lessons learned are, don't finish something just for the sake of finishing it. It's always better to just take a break and put it on pause than it is to rush to get it done. And also for me personally, I shouldn't withhold myself from knitting a new project while also being reasonable about the amount of projects I have on the needles at once. If one's requiring more time, heck, this is knit up on 3.5mm needles. I shouldn't be surprised by how long it's taking. It's better to just kind of put a pause on that and let's move on to the stitches sweater and still get this done at that leisurely pace. So that's what I learned, and maybe you could take something from that as well, or maybe not. So we'll see where this is at in the next podcast. That is the Granada sweater by Claudia Quintanilla. Well, you guys, that is everything that I've been working on over the past 2 weeks. I did have an acquisition and I showed it to you already. Actually, I could show you one more little thing that I picked up. I've just been popping into Joann's anytime I can. So sad that they're not going to be around anymore. But in my travels, I found these antique brass style snaps. And with the new direction that the stitches sweater took, although my original vision was for it to have pink snaps, and I think that'd be really fun, I just thought that these would be a really perfect fit. I thought that they kind of tied everything in really well, and antique brass is my favorite metal, so I did just snag those while I was at Joann's. And then of course I have the rest of the yarn for that sweater on the way. Like I mentioned earlier, I did put out my 2025 knitting plans video last Saturday, and let me just say a huge thank you for the warm reception that you guys have given it. I am overthinker. That's who I am. So naturally, it took me 3 months to kind of fully assess my knitting plans. But if you didn't watch that video yet, you might not know that we're going to be running this year-long knit along. It's called 2025 From the Vault. And the concept is just focusing on projects that use what you have already, be that yarn that you have in stash or patterns that are sitting in your Ravelry library or in those books that you have on your shelves. This isn't an exclusive, you can't buy new yarn or anything like that. It's really just an intention and a focus on using what you have, and why not give it a fun name, Knitting from the Vault. So if you're at all interested in participating in this year-long knit along, you can use that hashtag just throughout the year, 2025 from the vault. Let us know in the comments or on Instagram, wherever you want, just the projects that you're working on utilizing stuff from the vault. And then at the end of the year, I'm going to organize some fun giveaways, but also throughout the year, I'll just kind of cherry pick here and there and do random giveaways as we please. This way, there's kind of a sense of community. Just anyone using that hashtag will be included. So let us know what's in your vault or what it is that you think you could knit according to that concept throughout the rest of the year. Also, if you didn't watch the video, I would love it so much if you would go check it out. It was a lot of fun to put that together and really organize all of my plans and thoughts for the rest of the year. And it sounds like you guys that did watch it could really connect with the kind of message behind it. So like I said, thank you so much for watching that video. And I think that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, I would so appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe and ring the bell, then you're going to be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can always count on there being a new video every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, a big old thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.